this podcast, Maksim Pecherskiy, Chief Data Officer at City of San Diego, talks about big data in big cities. So stay tuned. So welcome everyone to another episode of Future of Data podcast. Today we have with us Maksim Pecherskiy. He's the Chief Data Officer for the City of San Diego. And a brief bio. So he's working in the performance and analytics department. Maksim strives to bring the necessary component together to allow cities residents to benefit from more efficient agile government that is as innovative as community around it. He has been solving complex problems with technology for nearly a decade. He spent 2014 working as a Code for America Fellow in Puerto Rico with a focus on economic development. His team delivered a product called Primer Piso that provides business owners and residents tool to search and apply for government programs for which they may be eligible. Before moving to California, Maksim was a solution architect at Source in Chicago, where he built large web applications and designed complex integrations. He shaped workflow, configuration management, and continuous integration processes while landing and training international development teams. Before his work at Promit, he was a software engineer at All Players, who was instrumental in design and architecture of the company's APIs as well as development and documentation of supportive client libraries in various languages. Maksim graduated from DePaul with Bachelor of Science degree in Information Systems and from Linköping University, Sweden, with a Bachelor of Science degree in International Business. He is also certified as a Lean Six Sigma belt. So, Maksim, with that, welcome to the podcast.
Wow, that makes me sound super impressive.
It's all you, man. It's all you. So, before we start, I think what I found fascinating about your profile, as I think we were talking before the podcast, City of San Diego. It's not a small thing. It's a big city, and doing a big data for big cities. It's fabulous. So why don't you walk us through your journey? Like, what brought you to this?
So kind of as you read, my background is really in software engineering. I've done a lot of software engineering, data architecture, things like that, and I've designed large systems and complex integrations. So I really like to do that kind of stuff. And at a certain point, I looked at my life and career a little bit, and I kind of decided, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I wanted to see if there's a way that I could bridge, my passion for technology and my skills in technology with, a way to help people or a way to have a little bit more of a meaningful, impact on the world. And I ended up applying to Code for America, and I worked at Code for America for 11 months. It was a fellowship. And through that, I worked with the municipality or the territory of Puerto Rico. So I worked with the CIO there and the government on the island level to try to influence economic development or try to improve the economic development there. So they have, on the island level, they have 16 economic development agencies. There's also 78 municipalities on the island, and some of the larger ones also have various economic development functions. And so it was a very daunting task, and it was me and a team of two other people, UX researcher and a designer. And what we ended up doing is we ended up interviewing quite a bit of people, business owners, government people, and we created this concept of a product called Primer Piso, which we eventually ended up building. And the interesting thing for me was it was actually a pretty boring technical build. It wasn't very challenging to build at all. But it was the right solution. And the impact that it's had was, when the fellowship was coming to the end, I was like, hey, I like doing this, even if I'm not pushing technology all the way to its limit, or even if I have to compromise there, I really like making a difference in people's lives. And and then honestly, this just kind of came up on a mailing list. And I saw that, this is a C-level position and eighth largest city in the country. And, I'm just like, what the heck? I'll apply. I'll see what happens. They're probably looking for a bureaucrat. I have tattoos, so we'll see. Um, and I ended up getting a call for an interview, and then I actually ended up interviewing with the mayor. That was my last interview, and I almost screwed that up twice because at first he comes into the room and I'm sitting there, and then he's like, "Do you want a cup of coffee?" And if you ever ask me for coffee, my instant answer is going to be yes, like no matter what time of day it is, or And so I just instinctively said yes, and so he goes and makes me a cup of coffee. And so I'm like, oh my God, the mayor's making me a cup of coffee. I'm done. and and then as the interview goes on, he asks me a question, and I pull out my laptop, and my laptop has a bunch of stickers on it. And one of those stickers is, like the Facebook, thumbs up. Well, it's the same style, but it's a middle finger. It's from the hackathon. So I open my laptop, and there's a middle finger facing the mayor. I didn't know this at the time. I only found out like 3 months later after I got hired. But obviously, he can take me asking him for a cup of coffee and flipping him off during an interview. So seems like a good place to work, right?
That's a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that. So what do you do now? Like, what's your work looks like nowadays?
So initially, when I first started, my job got created with the open data policy that passed in 2014. And so the open data policy, it has a 5-year time span. So we're going to be, kind of coming up for renewal and probably expanding it a little bit. But what it really is it had several pieces to it. The first piece was try to understand what data the city has. So the city has 36 different departments, 11,000 people, all kinds of different IT systems, but nobody's actually done a data inventory up until that point and try to understand what do we actually have. So that was the first part of it. Now that we know what we have, let's try and figure out, what is it that we can release to the public as data sets on the portal. And then, and obviously this is very asynchronous. This is not synchronous at all. And then once, we figure out what we can release, well, let's stand up a portal and release it. And that's what we did. So I worked with 65 people across 36 departments to build up a data inventory to try to understand what data systems do we have, what data do we have, what are our subject matter areas that we have, who are the data coordinators that I can call up and ask questions about it, things like that. And then we identified what we can release, and eventually we ended up buying an open data portal, and that was fine, but I had some requirements that the product didn't fit, and so we decided to build our own. And so we run our own data portal at data.sandiego.gov, and it's great. I'm very happy with it. So that's kind of the thing that started it off. And then it's like, well, hey, we have access. First of all, we have we have all this data that we need to move out to the portal, right? So then I have two options. Do I go with a bureaucratic process and try to, make people, fill out forms and try to like extract CSV files out of their database and upload them manually to a bucket somewhere, right? Which, if you're trying to create culture change and trying to make people use data better, that's a terrible idea, right? Or I can just automate the whole thing, right? And so that was kind of our next step. Is we said, okay, we're not going to make people do things manually. We're going to let machines do what they do best, and humans do what they do best, right? And so what we did is we stood up Airflow. So Airflow is an open source project by Airbnb. And we stood that up internally within the city. And so now we codenamed it Poseidon because code names are awesome. And the Trident and all that.
Yeah.
So Poseidon now runs the stuff that's back in the data portal. We're also sending automated alerts for various things. We're continuously moving data around. We're connected. I had to write connectors for stuff that Airflow did not have, like
Mm.
Oracle 8, Samba shares, like crazy old school legacy city stuff. I think there's even a mainframe connector because we used to have a CAD, computer aided dispatch system that ran on a mainframe. So so that was the next big thing. And then, so now we're doing this alerting and we're moving this data around.
Mm.
And so we have access to a lot. We're starting to have access to a lot of different data. And alerting is nice, but what about prediction? What about performance management, right? Like all those things. So we brought on a data scientist, and then we actually started building a data science program and um, started to really engage with department to understand, okay, here's what your operations looks like. Here are your pain points. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out where is it the data can fit in the right way, whether it be through an application, through an alert, through an analysis, that will make your operations better and will make your lives easier.
Interesting.
So that's a long description of what it is that we do.
Nice. No, I think that's fascinating. So you talk about a lot of collaboration. Like, so creating data inventory is not an easy task. You have to have all those departments supporting and sort of agreeing to your mission and giving you data. And walk us through that process of how does that convincing someone or department to sort of work to create this inventory work. So what all uh, effort went into that, and if you can walk us through that.
So you mean how do I get people to do what I ask them to do?
In different departments, right? Yeah.
Yeah, without having direct control of them. So I don't know. People like me, I guess. um, no, so there's definitely people that you know don't do what I ask them to do.
Mm,
Let's all be honest here. Stuff happens. But I think that it's a really a communication thing, right?
mm,
People have historically looked at data, and not historically. I mean, data's been around for only so long, but people generally tend to look at data as KPIs and
mm,
performance metric, and as a way to get yelled at, right? And it's a stick, it's not a carrot.
mm,
Um, I think a lot of what I've had to do is to really educate people around the fact that, hey, that one time that you have to, once a week, you have to call Betty in the water department and hope to God she's not on vacation because you need this
mm,
data set from her and she's going to send it to you manually. And if you don't get it, you get in trouble, even if she's on vacation and it's not your fault. So that whole thing, I can make that go away. Let's make it go away, right? Um, so there's that, and then there's the there's the aspect of data that's more of, this is not about KPIs, right? This is about improving your process. This is about, you need to make a case for more resources. This is how you do that using data. You need to improve your call center staffing. This is how you do it using data.
mm,
So, it's really about understanding. I really do believe in the fact that, like, you have to go in and you have to understand where are people at, where their pain points are,
mm,
and really understand how they work and what it is that they do and what's important to them, and communicate around that. Because, I mean, and I know, and I'm sure the audience knows that, data is obviously useful, right?
mm,
Um, it's just that I recognize pretty early, like, I will see 10 different use cases, and the person I'm talking to will see one, and the one
mm,
that they see is the KPI that they get yelled at about,
mm.
you know.
Interesting. And so fascinating, by the way, and thank you so much for walking us through that. So when you join in and sort of you are tasked to do this, and you rightly said it's a bureaucratic organization, and then uh, what role has leadership played in giving you an ample freedom, and if there are folks from other city offices, watching this, what should they learn from this, like your experience? What has been your journey
Um,
like on that?
so I think that the mayor and the council really gave us the kickstart, right? They kind of gave us the seed funding, right,
Hmm.
with the open data policy and the support there, and saying, hey, the mayor said so, right? We got
Hmm.
to release this data. Let's make it work. Um, but everything, all the other stuff I mentioned, the automation, the analytics, all that, that was purely um, collaboration with other staff, right? I think that at least for us, the culture here is um, I can go talk to the COO or I can go talk to the directors and soak in my team. And it's not, there's no that rigid hierarchy that you kind of generally envision in government. People are very open and very receptive.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if you're able to communicate well and if you're able to convey the value of what you're trying to do, I think that that's a big win, and it's a way to get things done. The other things that we've started doing, it's probably like more of the advice that I would give is
Hmm.
data is a buzzword, right? Like we kind of operate in this buzzword space. Also if you're working government, smart cities, another buzzword. And so, initially when we started doing more of the project-based work,
Hmm.
people would come up with these projects and we'd be like, yeah, sure, we can build that. We come back and we work for a month and we build it, and then we come back and it would never get used,
Hmm.
or it would never go into production. And there's two things that we started to learn from that. One is now we have lightweight scopes of work.
Hmm.
So it's a very non-bureaucratic document. We go back and forth with the department. We narrow down what it is we're going to do. We're going to narrow down who the team is. And the way a scope of work gets approved is my main partner sends me an
Hmm.
email saying, okay, that's it. That's all I ask. The other thing that we do is for the initial project briefing, we will bring in the person one or two levels above my main partner
Hmm.
and explain that to them. So now there's accountability from that direct boss. And so between those two, right, it's more of like it's a soft push. It's again, it's a
Hmm.
carrot. It's not a stick. Um, and kind of defining a beginning and an end to a project. Those things have been extremely valuable in actually making sure that we're not spending time spinning our wheels on work that never ends up seeing the light of day or never ends up in production
Hmm.
because somebody got distracted with something else, or another political reason came up, or whatever happened.
Interesting. And what are some of the surprises that you have got when you sort of create this inventory of data and you're cross collaborating with a lot of departments? Like, what are some of the things that you were not expecting to see but you end up seeing, and how do you
um
overcome those?
I think my main surprise, and I honestly I still get surprised,
Hmm.
we do a lot of really cool stuff. As an example, one of the depart one of the it was actually not a department, it was a section of our water department. It's called
Hmm.
Environmental Monitoring and Technical Services that
Hmm.
I got to visit and work with. There is a division, and their entire job is to monitor the ocean and how we're polluting or not polluting the ocean and the levels of chemicals in the ocean. And so they have this giant, I mean, not giant, but they have a lab by the airport, and you're walking around in there, and there's all kinds of like little samples of dead octopi and
Hmm.
fish. And I think there's like a lobster in an aquarium. And this is like the municipal government of the city of San Diego, right? Like and um, they manage something called the LIMS, which is a
Hmm.
laboratory information management system, which is an Oracle database, and they have to keep track of stuff in there, and they spend a good chunk of time every year generating reports for the state of California, right? Like it's really cool, some of the things that we do. um, I think that was probably, we
Hmm.
manage an airport, right?
Hmm.
Like it's an entire spectrum of things, and so I think that was probably my favorite set of surprises that came up.
Interesting. And San Diego is a busy freaking city. How do you end up sort of how do you prioritize things when it comes to sort of which project to go for and which one should take precedence? How do you what are some of the things that you, if you can walk us through that?
Um, so, well, remember how you asked me earlier, you know, what happened or how do I get people to work with me,
Hmm.
right? Well, they're not great at working with me. Guess who's going down lower on the list,
Hmm.
right? That's a really big one. It's do we have a willing and capable partner and department? Can we, you know, we can't really work on the project if we don't have that. So that really gets
Hmm.
dropped. That's a really good way to drop it down. And I
Hmm.
mean, it's a city, right? It's a city government, it's a political organization. There's politics that gets involved. My
Hmm.
mayor's priorities are my priorities. And so, that's a really important factor in how we prioritize things as well. The other thing that we really focus on is can we get the data?
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times we will have, um, for whatever reason, the purchasing contracts have been written in such a way where the vendor runs a database somewhere on their servers, and we're not allowed to get any data out of it at all, right? And so that's kind of a showstopper. Um, and then lastly, you know, impact,
Hmm.
because if I improve, if for example I have a way to improve how somebody manages, public records documents
Hmm.
versus better dispatching of emergency medical services, right? Like the medical services is definitely going up because that's more impactful. Because there's
Hmm.
still a limited amount of things we can do, right? Like, and I don't have an infinite amount of time or an infinite amount of people, and you know, the things have to get prioritized.
Interesting. And what are some of the ingredients of a leader of a data driven leader in city or in civic landscape? Like what are some of the qualities that are much appreciated in sort of in your template of
Uh,
data governance? Yeah.
um, Tattoos, piercing, no. Um, so I would say I have a strong technical background and I
Mm.
understand how to put things together. Um, in terms of architecture, I think that is fair, and I also understand how to work with IT,
Mm.
because I have a background in actual IT, and I think that is really important. The CDO or the data team, and IT are really two sides of the same coin, and making sure that you have a good relationship with IT and cybersecurity, and you're not carrying around PII and a flash drive
Mm.
somewhere, right? Like that stuff is really important. I think so. So I think that's a big aspect. Um, but I think the other side of that coin is I I have a lot of really good relationships with people in the city, with
Mm.
at all levels of the organization, everywhere from council members to directors to line level staff.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, honestly, I think part of it is just like my personality, right? Like I have every lunch booked, and I'm at happy hour all the time. Not because I like drinking, but I actually drink club soda at happy hour. But but that is just the culture, and that is how you build
Mm.
relationships, and that part is extremely important because people, and also and honestly, being here for a while is important as
Mm.
well. People know that you're not some tech guy from Silicon Valley coming in, doing a news story, and then rolling out, right? Like, you're here. I've been here for a while. People trust me. I have relationships, and and that matters, and that carries weight. And I think those are the qualities. The other one I would say is being very um, skeptical of what it is that you say yes to.
Hmm.
Um, so not that you have to say no all the time, but it's just like what we said earlier, right? There's a limited amount of time, there's a limited amount of bandwidth, there's technical limitations, there is, stakeholder limitations, there's all these different things. And so, you kind of, especially in the beginning, you definitely want to set yourself up to be successful and to show that you've been successful. And because that is how you build the credibility and that is how you build the relationship. So, so now that it's later on, I can take a little bit more risky stuff,
Hmm.
um, because I have the street cred to be able to take the more risky stuff.
Interesting. And how does your interaction with other cities work? So, like, do you collaborate with other cities as well, and how does that work?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of cool. So I have just from personal relationships from Code for America, and it's just the
Hmm.
people that I kind of hang out with that kind of do the same thing. So I have a lot of connections in cities across the country,
Hmm.
and also Puerto Rico and some cities in Asia as well. Um, and I'm part of this thing called the Harvard Civic Analytics Network,
Hmm.
and we meet once every 6 months, and it's CDOs from major cities in the U.S. and it's you know part therapy group, part knowledge sharing, and so we get together for 2 days in Boston, and we there's an agenda, and we talk. Stephen Goldsmith puts that together, um, and that's probably the most valuable thing I go to in terms of conferences, because there's a lot of differences across city governments, but there's also a lot of similarities.
Hmm.
And kind of just sitting there in the same room with people that have been through the same things as you have, or that are going through the same things as you have, and listening to how they address it is extremely valuable.
Interesting. And in your interaction with other city representatives, like what have you seen are some of the um, shortfalls or some of the opportunities that other cities that you see that they could do to improve their infrastructure when it comes to or at least the knowledge of like what are some of the things that you hear a lot about other cities and what are something they're doing wrong?
So what are some of the cool things that other cities are doing? Um, Chicago, I know, has been doing quite a bit of work with. They did this really cool predictive project about rats.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm from Chicago, and rats are definitely a thing. Um, and and so they did this really cool predictive project about trying to figure out in which alleys rats are most likely to happen and try to address that. They've also done something with the community with Lake Michigan and the
Hmm.
water quality monitoring there. Um, I'm trying to think. San Francisco, they've done a bunch of things around housing, which is also really cool. They actually have a really great site, Data SF. Um, and yeah, there's quite a lot. The Allegheny County, which is the county in Philadelphia, Philadelphia, yeah, that Pittsburgh is in. Um, they do some really amazing things in their health health section around predictive analytics around healthcare outcomes and public health. Um, I think that's really we don't deal with any healthcare data outside of
Hmm.
EMS, but if we did, that's definitely an area I would want to go for.
And typically does city share their models with each other? I think so. You are blessed with as you said, eighth most
Oh
populated
yeah.
city. So
So
yeah,
one of the coolest things about working for a city is it's all open source, right? Like, I mean, obviously
yeah.
we don't share like PII and things like that. But the Public Records Act request or the
Hmm.
FOIA at the federal level, right? Like, you can go and make a Public Records Act. You can see all of my emails. Please don't do that. But so all of our stuff's on GitHub,
Hmm.
because why not, right? And that's just that cities are really open at sharing things with each other, because you know one reason is kind of just this commiseration, or not brotherhood either, but whatever that word is that I'm looking for.
Hmm.
part of it is just that. But part of it is, why not? If I have a
Hmm.
great model for predicting EMS calls and, the city of New York wants to use it, then please, why would I stop them? It's not like we're not competing.
Right,
There's no
right.
competition.
Interesting. And what do you think some of the cities are doing wrong, like, or they don't get it right about the data or how to manage their setup? Like, what are some of the things that when you talk about other city representatives that they're doing it wrong?
Um, I mean, I would not. I would. I would hedge saying anyone's doing anything wrong because
Mm.
everybody in my position in a different city is a product of where they are in their organization, the political environment that they're in, the team that they have, right? Like it's not. I would stay away from doing from things that people are doing wrong. But um, I will say, the things that we focus on here that I don't see many other cities doing are automation and governance. And so what you'll usually see is cities will come up with a static report during data analysis, or they'll run the data once, maybe they'll have a Jupyter notebook, um, and that'll kind of be it, and that'll be the end of the project.
Mm.
We and this is, I think, just a little bit of my background. We focus on it more programmatically, right? Because of our automation system, because of data delivery, because of alerting. Sometimes we'll just do the one-off report, but more often than not, we'll actually integrate it into the workflows. And so I think that's a missed opportunity that I think
Mm.
a lot of cities could go for. The other thing is, and we're getting there here. It's definitely not perfect, but in terms of um, doing data governance and data governance, not in the typical data governance, master data management sense, because I don't know how effective. I have opinions on that, which probably I was going to mistake. But what I like to think of as data governance is more on the data discovery side, right?
Mm.
Like I want to know the data exists. I want to know where it is. I want to know if it's authoritative. I want to know if there's any analysis that's been done to it, and I want to know if there's any fields or what the fields mean. Um, so those things, we have an internal data catalog that we use. We use Elation for that. And it connects to a bunch of our different databases, and it's able to look at the query logs and infer some of that. And then we have people logging in and filling out additional things about the data.
Mm.
Um, and so I don't really see cities focusing on that. It's always like call the department, get the
Mm.
data, do the analysis, okay, we're done. Um, and I think that's another missed opportunity because I think that, um, ideally, in my perfect world, I have awesome people in other departments that can run SQL, that are interested in learning Python, are interested in doing JS and mapping stuff. Um, I want to give them the tools
Mm.
to do that. Data catalog is one tool. We also have Carto. We're looking at Domino Lab um, for letting them write Jupyter in the cloud. But I want to empower them because there's only so much that my team can do, and I think really the power. I think everything becomes really, really great if we can spread out the analytics stuff out a little bit more to teams within other departments.
Interesting. And how does so do you collaborate with even the state and federal? How does that work? Like, if you can walk us through that.
Um, Federal. So we were in the police data initiative,
Hmm.
um, but I actually haven't heard from them for a while, so I'm not sure if that's still going on. Um, and beyond kind of just having some connections, people that I know, and going to a few conferences here and there, I don't tend to interact with federal that
Hmm.
much. Um, State, there is oh my god, GovOps. There's a GovOps
Hmm.
office in the state of California, and they're a great team. There's an open data section. There's also a performance management section, and there's a process improvement. So they're kind of almost our counterpart. Um, in the state of California. And so Stuart Drown and Angie Curarte, they're really great. And so, so we'll have a call once every few months and just kind of catch up, see what they're doing, see what we're doing, um, try to find similarities and see if there's things we can collaborate on. We also have agencies here in the region. So this is actually another thing I learned is so the city is one organization that manages stuff in the city, right? The county also has a hand in it. There's the Port of San Diego, which manages the waterways. There's Caltrans, which is another agency. There's the MTS, which is they run the buses and the trains and stuff. So there's a bunch of agencies in the region that do stuff. And so we collaborate with them quite a bit in terms of data sharing and projects. And, some of them we have standing meetings with, some of them we have standing lunches with. It really depends on what it is that we're working on at the time.
Interesting. And we hear a word called AI a lot. Like, so what is city mature enough, and then is it using AI in its, and can you share some of the use cases that you guys are using and are using AI for?
So, so as a developer, it's actually been really hard for me. Remember that thing I said in the beginning about kind of having the discipline to
Mm,
use the right technology for the job, even if
mm,
it's boring,
mm,
right? That's where I still am, right? Like I'm still using like fairly boring stuff for a lot of things we do, right? Like ETL is not cutting edge. Like let's just
mm,
all be honest here. Um, and in terms of AI, specifically AI, we have not found good use cases yet. There's really not much going on with AI because you have to inject it into the process correctly, and we just haven't seen opportunities to do that yet. Um, Predictive analytics and some machine learning stuff, we're starting to see some of that come up in either truck routing or
mm,
EMS dispatch or fire dispatch or police, things like that. That's been starting to come up, but it's still kind of very early stages in terms of. And by very early stages, I mean we're still trying to figure out if it is the right fit and find the right use cases for it. I'm very hesitant to say that there are no use cases for
mm.
AI in the city, but we just haven't found them yet because the organization is not technically and the data maturity just isn't there yet
Mm.
for them to surface, right? And so these use cases are more on us to find, and we haven't.
Interesting. And if in your personal journey as a data science leader, if you need to change something, like what would you think would be something that you would revisit and change as you are sort of grooming in this landscape?
If I were, oh, wait, elaborate a little bit on your question.
So
What do you
if
mean?
as a data science leader, if you need to change something in you, like what would that be? What would something that you think that you would change?
Change about me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. What would I change about me? I would probably, um, well, I'd like more staff,
Hmm.
but I mean, that's a very government thing to say. If anything, I like to be in more places at once.
Hmm.
I think that's what it is. I and maybe the other thing is maybe be a little bit better at politics.
Hmm.
Um, I don't I think I'm okay with talking to people, to regular operations people that just want to improve processes, things like that. Politics are a little bit of a different beast with a
Hmm.
different level of with like a 5,000 foot view instead of a thousand
Hmm.
foot view type of thing. That's probably what I would change, but I don't know if I would really. I don't know how strongly I feel about that statement. I don't know if I really want to get better at politics.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if you look at the past trends, like what do you think is the future of data in cities? Like what are we looking at, say 5 year, 10 year down the line? How would city consume data and analyze, and like what are some of the things, some of the trends that you could share that you are seeing cities moving very fast towards, that we should keep an eye on?
So I see the smart cities thing, it's been a huge buzzword for government people. And it's a really good thing and it's a really weird thing at the same time.
Hmm.
Every vendor is trying to slap the word smart city on their offering.
Hmm.
And it depends on the political environment. The city, cities may be willing to buy it or not. One of the things that I think that cities should, really think about is, security policy, data privacy policies when it comes to smart cities, and then also just purely operational IT policies. Do you want to have 5 different networks flying around? Do you want to have, sensors on, 5 different systems that you
Hmm.
now have to integrate? I think there's that aspect of it. Um, but I think, as time moves on in the future, I think that, what I said earlier about people thinking of data as KPIs, things to get yelled at about.
Hmm.
I think that, um, as more and more use cases come up and as more and more city projects are done with data as not being the hammer, but or the stick, but being the carrot, I think cities all across the country and the world are going to get a lot more into the predictive uses of data.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's actually how cities become smarter, not by not by putting a bunch of sensors all over the place.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm excited for that to happen. And then the other thing that I'm seeing is, you know, Uber, Lyft. We have a bunch of scooters out on the streets, smart cars, or no, not smart cars, self-driving vehicles, right? All
Hmm.
these additional things that are coming online now. Um, there need to be policies developed for how these companies share data with cities. And then
Hmm.
once that data is shared, I think cities will really start thinking hard about using that data for future planning and future community development, and maybe resource allocation. And I'm really excited for that to start happening. San Diego is kind of slowly moving in that
Hmm.
direction, but
Interesting.
I think that we're, just like every other city, I think like there's still a lot of space to go there.
Wonderful. And what are, so for a private enterprise, like what are some of the big opportunities that exist in the city landscape, that you, from your vantage point, that one should keep an eye on?
Um, so I guess I'll say this to like all the vendors that,
Hmm.
some version of this to every vendor that pitches us, right? Is
Hmm.
don't pitch me a platform and don't pitch me a solution, right? Because when you're coming in, you're pitching me one of those, you're assuming that you know my problems and you probably don't. Um,
Hmm.
um, Pitch me the time that you're going to spend figuring out my problems,
Hmm.
and pitch me the time and how you're going to work with me to address them, right? Um, because so what I was saying earlier about, we don't just go and build technology and throw it
Hmm.
at something and expect the problem to be solved, right? We really
Hmm.
go in and understand what needs to happen and work with the department, try to figure out what is the right solution to that problem that they're having. The vendors, for some reason, don't do that.
Hmm.
They come in and it's like, hey, we have this great platform you know, for integrating sensors across different devices, and so you can see it in your dashboard. I'm like, well, okay, but I don't. The sensors are like 1/10 of my problem. I also have SAP and
Hmm.
Oracle 8 over there, right? And what am I supposed to do with that? Why shouldn't that go into the same dashboard, right? Like, so that kind of stuff. That's probably what I would say is my number one frustration working with vendors
Hmm.
is them coming in and saying like, "Hey, here's our solution, and you should buy it." Like, no, no, no. You need to listen to what what my use cases are first. and how your solution can fit.
I think that's a beautiful point. I think it's and thank you for sharing that, because this applies to almost. I remember like talking to city of uh, basic Atlanta at one point, and he actually said it best. He said, Vishal, you know what? One of their chief data guy, and he said that every time people try to sell us, and no one is trying to tell us. So he said that it gets very tricky, that they just go with their berserk, like after two sentences the same thing. So why don't you
Hmm.
just stop and listen to what problem I have? I think, and you nailed it. I think from that perspective, that it's
Yeah,
it's very critical.
exactly, exactly.
Interesting. And now let's spend few minutes on your journey. Like if uh, in your coming to this role, what are some of the things or some of the qualities or one, two, three qualities that you think that has really helped you stay successful in this role? Like what would you attribute those qualities be?
Mm, well, so you know how beautifully spoken I was and eloquent on this podcast. Um, 4 years ago, that would not have been the case at all, right? This is all learned. Um, so it's definitely not one of them. I would say that having an understanding of technology, really, in terms of like
Hmm.
having built it and having used it and you know having worked with it, and an understanding of IT and cybersecurity and all that, I think that's probably the thing that's allowed me to succeed the most.
Hmm.
Um, Learning to talk, that was another big one, that helped a lot and kind of articulate what it is that I need, what it is that I want. Um, and the other part is, so because I used to work in startups and dev shops and on teams of developers, I I've been through the experience where I came in as a person that only knew about 20% of what I needed
Hmm.
to know to do the job, and I had a team that taught me. And then I also had the experience of knowing 100% of what needed to be done for the job, and having created a process for people, so the people that come in, one, to train up, but also to work in the process, right? So everything from like code management to continuous integration, um, to all of that kind of stuff. Um, that there's no architecture for that at the city, and so without that, I don't think we would be able to do our work, or it would be just a mess, right? So
Hmm.
I creating a process and enforcing it and running my team like a dev shop and like a dev team, um, that has also allowed me to be extremely successful. Um, and the other part is just juggling a lot of projects and a lot of things at once and waiting for
Hmm.
people at different stages and being able to manage all that and kind of creating this hybrid version of agile that's not agile. Um, that was really hard, but it was so worth it.
Interesting. Yes. Well said. And one thing we ask all of our guests is to share some of their reads or some of the books that they are reading, or their, like, do you have any favorite that you can share with our community members?
Oh, yes. So the Phoenix Project, I think it was
Hmm.
written in 2013, maybe. It's an older-ish book.
Hmm.
But it's a novel about IT and DevOps, which I know just sounds like a massive oxymoron, but it is actually a really light, great read. And it makes you think kind of about how, process and Kanban, project management, and, DevOps, and how all these things are important. And it's not just the end product, it's everything that happens behind it that is, is what forms your success. So I would highly recommend reading that book.
Interesting. Thank you so much. And now we're at the last question, not the least. So, if you want the listeners and viewers to take away something from that conversation, like what would that be? So, what would be your closing remark for our listeners and viewers?
I would say that, uh, listen. You know, technology um, is a thing that solves a problem. It is not the end all be all. right?
Mm.
And you have to find the right problem to solve, and you have to solve it the right way. Um, and you have to be okay, like I am, unfortunately, with not using GPUs or AI or
Mm.
TensorFlow or machine learning if it doesn't fit.
Mm.
If it fits, great, go for it, right? Um, if but you kind of have to that part, that discipline part of saying I'm not going to use the latest shiniest tool is really freaking hard. But it is worth it in the end because you are actually making an impact. Assuming you made the right choice, you're actually
Mm.
making an impact in solving a problem other than just delivering a thing that nobody's going to use.
Interesting. With that, Maxim, thank you again so much for your time and for being really candid about the nuances on what it takes to run a city and run the data setup for a city. I do appreciate that, and we are always welcome back on the podcast. Whenever you are in Boston, do give a holler. Love to meet over a coffee or something. So
Oh, I
thank
didn't
you.
realize you're in Boston.
Yes,
Yes,
I
we're
am in
definitely
Boston.
good.
Yes, I think that's why when you said you come often, do let me know,
Yeah,
and then we should
I'm
catch up
there once
soon.
every 6 months. I'm definitely going to hit you up and we'll grab a coffee.
That's awesome. And with that, thank you so much and appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me. It was really a pleasure.
Awesome. So,
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a